Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam. Good morning. Welcome to the Java Cafe, Java fam.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning. Today is Tuesday, November 23rd, 2021, and we are in the week of Thanksgiving. And given that, we tend to maybe eat a lot, eat a bit extra, eat some things we don't usually eat during the year. We also have to consider when we talk about healthy living. That is today's topic. We're going to bring in Dr. Alabre in just a few moments, but do me a favor. There is a wealth of information that's going to be shared with you today by our Dr. Fatima Stanford, who is not able to be with us live, but we did a pre-record. I will name right now, we have some new graphics and new colors, and we pre-recorded with her before we did the upgrade. So you will see kind of a different aesthetic, but we're going to talk about healthy living during the holidays. So do me a favor, hit that share button. If you're watching on Twitter right now, retweet it for us. Shout out to all of our friends at Massachusetts General Hospital, especially in the Office of Equity and Community Health, to Dr. Betancourt and team, the sponsors of Your Healthy Java here in the Java Cafe. And so without further ado, I would like to bring in, I refer to him as my co-host, but he is a co-host and the medical director of this great partnership here with Massachusetts General Hospital. And so let's say hello to Dr. Alabre this morning. Good to see you in the room. Let's give you some applause.
Wow, that's quite the welcome. I appreciate it. Thank you, Jimmy.
I'm getting there, sir. How are you? How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you.
That is well. And so it's Thanksgiving week, Dr. Alabre. Can I just get a little personal a little bit? And what's your favorite meal for Thanksgiving? And I want you to be very specific and tell us sort of an unhealthy one.
Oh, that's a big question. I do have a lot of favorites, but I do like a pecan pie.
A pecan pie, not pecan. Pecan.
Not pecan, no, pecan.
Pecan.
It's gonna be pecan pie.
How important is it, Dr. Alabre, as we get ready to get into our presentation with Dr. Stanford, and a registered dietitian from Massachusetts General Hospital is joining us as well. Abeer Bader would be with us about 9:20 or so to answer some questions. As I mentioned before, Dr. Stanford can't be here with us live. I believe she's in Dubai doing a presentation. Yeah. I just have to celebrate the fact that she is the first clinician that I met with all of the wonderful you saw on the flyer, multiple credentials. And so she definitely is someone who knows what she's talking about. So Dr. Alabre, you talked about pecan pie. This time of year, especially in, Black and brown communities for various reasons, we tend to not eat so healthy. I will name in the video something that I partake in this time of year that is not particularly healthy to some people. But how important is it that this topic, we pay attention to it today?
Well, it's important to pay attention to today, but I would say also all the time, to be honest. And so, I mean, we want people to celebrate. This is not about not celebrating, not doing the things you love. We just kind of want to add a little bit of balance to it. And sort of how can we do it a little bit healthier and, also sort of learn a little bit today and take it for tomorrow and Christmas and whatever else is coming up. So there are ways to enjoy and still not overdo it or take a big step back in your healthy living.
So would you say in moderation?
Moderation is always
moderation. Absolutely. And so what we want to do is present you or present rather the talk that Dr. Stanford and I had about a week or so ago, a couple of weeks ago, actually. And so we're going to do that live. Again, the aesthetics are a little different, but we're going to take questions at the end. Again, we have a registered dietitian from Massachusetts General Hospital who will join us as well. And so please pay attention to this presentation, and we will be back with you in just a little bit. Good morning again. As you all know, Dr. Fatima Stanford is not able to be with us live, but we thought it was so important, Dr. Alabre, morely him because he knows her expertise, but we thought it was important to do a pre-record with her to ensure that we get the information from her about healthy living. We are in the week of Thanksgiving, and as you all know, within Black and Brown communities, we do some interesting eating throughout the year, but definitely during the year, people tease me, Dr. Stanford, we'll have you introduce yourself, but I consume chitlins and things like that. So I'm going to get in trouble. So I'm going to shut up and introduce you to Dr. Fatima Stanford. She comes highly recommended. I was just joking with her in sort of the studio background that if you work in medicine and you know that someone has a lot of letters behind their name and credentials, that they are definitely more than apt to speak in a particular subject. And so I want to jump in and ask Dr. Stanford if you would introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about yourself, and how you would describe healthy living in one word.
So absolutely. First of all, it's a delight to be here. I'm Dr. Fatima Cody Stanford. I am an obesity medicine and physician and scientist here at Massachusetts General Hospital and at Harvard Medical School. I'm one of the first fellowship trained obesity medicine physicians in the world. And when I say that to people, people ask, what does that mean? What is an obesity medicine physician? It means that I care for patients with overweight and obesity across the age spectrum. So I'm trained as both an internist and a pediatrician. And so my patients range from the age of 2 to the age of 90. So I think that we can agree that that's a very large spectrum. And when we think about this idea of healthy living, let's see, the one word that I would use is health, which sounds redundant, but health is all encompassing. It really gets into a large focus of us recognizing that health is not just one thing or one factor or one body weight. It's an entire being. And so that's what I would use is the word health, which is in the question, but definitely the thing I would utilize.
Absolutely. And Dr. Stanford, you'll learn as hopefully you'll come again, but I do things in real time and they're organic, as I see you do as well in your appearances on larger media outlets than this little local one. But within Black and Brown communities, you know, often I've heard about things about BMI. It's different for Black and Brown people. And so we have a set of questions, but I just want to ask a little bit, if you could give us a couple of seconds about the variation and how my understanding, not a physician, the BI index doesn't take into consideration our culture, all of our curves and things like that.
Yeah, so I want to talk about, we can talk about BMI. So just for those that are listening, BMI stands for body mass index, and it's an indirect measure, indirect being the key word that I will state there, that helps us to determine one's weight status. But the reason why I say indirect is that it's not necessarily measuring fat or adipose tissue. So adipose or fat tissue is what we really care a lot about. And actually, I published the study in 2019 in the Mayo Clinic Proceedings, where I actually redrew the BMI charts based upon race and ethnicity and gender here in the United States. What we found across the board for men, whether you're white, Hispanic, or African-American or Black, is that the BMI chart, which the cutoff is usually 30 to be defined as having obesity, it actually shifts downward. So believe it or not, Black men, in terms of the cutoff, actually goes below what we would assume would be the actual number, which is 30 in the general population. But for Black women, the group that has the highest rates of obesity, the BMI chart shifts up. And the cutoffs range between 31 and 33 as being kind of the alarm points with which we take action. Now, BMI, I think, is one measure. It's an indirect measure, and it's really great on a population basis. But when I'm working with patients, I never give them a target weight. I want to get them to the happiest, healthiest weight for them, not using a confined BMI measure as my indicator of our success in our work together.
Dr. Stanford, thank you so much for that, because that is one of the things that is definitely a not a myth, but when it comes to the area of obesity and healthy living, and also considering our culture. Thank you for giving that clarity, and I'll ask Dr. Alabre at some point to maybe go over with us, or you can come back and go over with us that sort of BMI breakdown. But we're here today to talk about healthy living. And in your work, what have you found to be some of the most common health issues associated with unhealthy living, and particularly in the context of Black and Brown patients?
I want to start off with the thing that is the most important issue for us to think about with healthy living, and that's number one is stress. Okay, so what people don't recognize is that stress affects us and all of our likelihood of developing chronic issues, whether it's obesity, which is obviously what I focus on, or heart disease, or diabetes, or a slew of other conditions. And so I want us to really be mindful about the stress that we have in our life, recognizing that we will all have some stress, but the degree of stress that we often have can really lead to poor and worsened health outcomes. So I think that that's something that we often don't take into account when we're thinking about our health. The word that I used at the outset is the key to healthy living, is that stress has huge impacts. Now, as Black and Brown communities, there are stressors that we may face that others wouldn't, particularly something like racism, for example, right? You don't experience racism if you're a white individual, but as a Black person here in the United States, you often probably have been subjected to racism. And that being subjected to racism leads to increased stress, which leads to increased likelihood of developing certain health conditions and diseases and other issues. So I would say stress is at the outset. But when we're thinking about healthy living, we want to think about diet quality, not necessarily quantity. Lean protein, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables being our predominant source. We want to look at the quality and duration of our physical activity, our sleep. These are really major things that we want to put together to really develop that equation of what it means to be a healthy individual who is doing healthy living.
I want to go back and ask you, as the young people say, for the people in the back, to repeat the protein, the quality of diet. But before we go back to that, because I'd like to spend a little time there, seeing that we're in the week of Thanksgiving, and taking in all the historical context to which you pointed that led to why we eat the way we eat. But the other S word that you mentioned when it comes to healthy living is sleep. Now, I'll be very transparent. Pre-COVID, worse during COVID, my sleep hygiene is terrible. Terrible. How important, Dr. Stanford, is sleep hygiene when it comes to healthy living?
Sleep hygiene is something that's extremely important. Now, it's the thing that I model less well for patients. I would say that I do very good with all of the other things that I've talked about, but we don't recognize the importance of sleep as it relates to our health. It actually has huge implications for a variety of diseases. Dysregulated sleep means our body is unable to do the repair that it does when we go to sleep. So the whole point of our bodies going to sleep is to repair damage that happens during our awake hours. So you can imagine if that sleep is shorter or fragmented, we don't get a chance to get that repair that we need in place to live our best lives. So with regards to sleep quality, we want it to be unfragmented. We want to stop the use of screen time of any kind, whether it be our phone, our iPad, etc., at least 1 hour prior to going to sleep. And that means that maybe you don't need a television in your bedroom, right? That's just something to bring up there. And if we do these things, our sleep hygiene is improved. It's a higher likelihood that we'll have a longer duration of sleep that's high quality, meaning not fragmented.
Thank you so much for that. And I'm going to do better. I saw the looks in the camera. I'm going to do better. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you to go back a little bit is you defined you said not the quantity of food, but the quality, and you named lean protein. So can you say that slowly, as they say, for the people in the back?
For the people in the back. So yes, when I go over diet with patients, I never ask them about the number of calories they're eating. That is what we've learned, but that's not the right thing. It's about the quality of one's diet. And what I mean by quality is we want this diet to have lean protein, whole grains, fruits and vegetables as the predominant source, okay? Now, fruit doesn't mean apple pie. Now, that's a great fruit-like source, right? but we're talking about the actual apple, right? Like eating the apple like it appears in nature. So a good quick cheat sheet, I guess, in terms of knowing, am I eating healthy without necessarily remembering lean protein, whole grains, fruits, and vegetables, is does your plate, your dinner plate or breakfast plate, does it look like things in nature? Does it actually look like what we see in nature? Or is it so processed that it no longer looks like how things appear in nature? Then you know your diet quality is poor. Highly processed things are the things that we're trying to move away from. Minimal to no processing. We want it to look like spinach when it hits our plate. We want it to look like an apple when it hits our plate. Once we process it, no longer is it healthy for us.
In this time, and as you alluded to, and there's so much there. I personally, this isn't a James nutritionist session, but we're in Thanksgiving week, and you made the point about non-processed and referring to apple pie. There's sweet potato pie. There's collard greens, there's smothered and ham hocks, and traditional sort of African American culture around the holiday. And how do we stay healthier? I love your cadence, and you're very atypical of some nutritionists that I've met. You're not counting calories. You're not talking about the quantity of food. And so how do we stay healthy during the holidays and maintain a healthy lifestyle? We can start with nutrition, and then maybe if you can reiterate the importance of sleep. Folks consume a little bit of extra alcohol over the holidays, which is a depressant, which you may think you're sleeping better, but you're the clinician.
Yes. But I like the fact that you were coming in with some things. So I would say that during the holidays, obviously, this is a time that we look forward to, right? The Thanksgiving holidays, I mean, some of the best food of the year, right? Where you get together, people that are really great. Like my sister makes hands down the best sweet potato pies in this country. She happens to also be trained as a chef in addition to her day job. So, I mean, phenomenal. There are certain things that you look forward to. So what I would say is there are a few things that you can do when you recognize that maybe the fare that you consume during Thanksgiving night, notice I said night,
Yep. Yes.
Right? Because what happens is we consume it Thanksgiving night, and then the day after that, and then the next week after that, etc. And so what we end up doing is we eat these great things that are probably not of the quality that I would want, and we prolong that for a long period of time. And then we get hit with the next holiday that comes right after that, where we do the same thing. So we change the way that we're eating for quite an extended period of time. And then we're concerned after the holidays why we've put on significant weight. And it's because we're doing not what we're supposed to do. So I want to keep this to Thanksgiving dinner. So I know this is hard, right? Because we prepare this large quantities of food, but maybe just prepare enough for who's going to be eating that day, maybe one day of leftovers, and then the end, right? So I think that we have to be thinking about this. I think that one thing that we don't do as families is get active. What if, like, before we went to dinner, we all went out for a family walk, right? That'd be cool. Like, you know, you're not isolated, you're not by yourself, the whole family's doing it. Or maybe after dinner, because you're like, now I need to get moving, and everyone goes out. You know, maybe you have like a pickup football game, a flag football game, or whatever the things are that the family likes to do. Maybe the kids like double dutch. Maybe they like hula hooping. I mean, these are things that, you know, as we get into our 40s, 50s, et cetera, that we may not be doing, but hey, we might be still pretty good at it. So why not bring those things out, those things that are great pastimes that we could just pick it back up and then make it part of a family affair. We often have extended family at these dinners. So I think this is a way that we can do this, but we just don't typically think about it. We choose to just sit in front of the television, and that's not a lot of bonding time that we're having in front of the television if we're just watching X game or whatever. I mean, they're not paying us. I mean, if you're not playing, if you're not working, you know, if you don't work for the NFL, you're not getting a paycheck. So just something to think about, you know, that sleep important. I think sleep becomes a bit more compromised during the holidays, right? We maybe up cooking late, up spending time with family. And so if you're going to have that time where you're staying up, maybe let's make that one night. Maybe it's the night before Thanksgiving in preparation, and then you get back on your normal schedule. Or maybe you set it up such as you're preparing your food all week long so that you don't have to have this really disrupted sleep that is hard to get back on track.
There is so much to unpack there, and a little cultural shift for some people. And so we're going to work on it. We're going to work on it. This is your healthy Java. And so we're going to work with you. You did indicate in general that one of the number one things that you pointed to when it comes to unhealthy living is stress. Let me ask you, in the context of the holidays, considering that nutrition, sleep deprivation, on the spot question, which one is the most concerning for you during the holidays, Dr. Stanford, between the stress, the sleeping, and then, you know, the extended holiday cultural diet? We'll frame it like that.
You know, I think I would love to give you a answer, but I think that would deviate from what I know to be true. Different people have different perturbations, meaning different things that affect them more than others, right? Sleep may be a major factor for one person, whereas for the next person, it's really how that diet quality shifts that makes a huge change. And for others, you know, it's that physical activity piece. Like for me, if I'm not active, I'm not as nice of a human being. Like I have to have that piece, and people know, let me do my workout or I might not be as nice to be around. So I think you have to listen to your body. This is what I always tell my patients, listen to your body. Maybe all three of those things are important. So think about yourself, think about a preceding holiday. Which things seem to be the things that were hardest to get back into the swing of things? And if whatever that thing is, the thing that seemed to be most laborious to get back into, that would be the thing that you want to focus your attention on as the key thing, and then work on the other factors also.
Dr. Stanford, this is a sort of a short segment, and I really would like to work with Dr. Alabre to get you back, because there's so much that you named that I really want to unpack more for our community. We really appreciate this opportunity to speak with you today and ask you to close with whatever free flow statement you would like to make to the community around staying healthy during this holiday season.
So first of all, excuse my sirens. I don't know if you want to wait for that, but I live in downtown Boston. So, but number one, let's just say, or the key thing that I want you guys to get is that being your happiest, healthiest self is what's most important. What being happy and healthy and even being at the best weight is varies from person to person. So I don't want you to compare yourself to anyone but yourself. We're getting you to your happiest, healthiest self. And what you do during the holiday season is reflective of what you should be doing year round. Just because we get into a holiday that brings us often a lot of joy, but also a lot of stressors, does not mean we need to deviate from the status quo, which is to be active, to be eating healthy, to be sleeping healthy, and doing whatever we can to minimize our stress. So during this time of year and all times of year, I want you to be healthy. I want you to be living your best life in the healthiest way possible. And if I want to leave with that, I really just want you to do that and recognize that how that looks for you might differ drastically, even from your sibling or your spouse or whomever.
Dr. Stanford, thank you so much. Again, in that answer, you unpacked so much, because you tapped in a little bit of the mental health issue and not measuring yourself by someone else's standards or comparing yourself. And as you know, sometimes when family gets together over the holidays, there's the aunt to say, "Ooh, baby, you done got pump over the year." And so thank you so much. I look forward to speaking with you again, and safe travels. Right now in real time, you're traveling, but safe travels. And thank you so much. We will definitely follow up with you to get more from you about this space of healthy living. Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for having me.
It's an honor. Thank you, ma'am. I definitely love Dr. Alabre. Let me get you off of mute there. I definitely love Dr. Fatima. We need to get her back on a few topics, but what are your thoughts in reference to her talk?
I mean, this was really well done, and I agree with obviously everything she said, and I hope people are really listening. The key thing is really health is not just about eating, as she mentioned. There's so many other factors, sleep and stress and everything else, and so we don't want this to be like, oh, you should not be eating this, should not be eating that. We're really talking about, let's just pause for a second and think about the things we're doing during the holidays, but also what we're doing in life in general, and not let that be the thing we do forever. And I'll tell you, I see patients all year, but one of the distressing things sometimes is it'll be April, March, May. I'm seeing patients and they still talk about that holiday weight or the holiday stress. And it's like, you know, we gotta put an end to this at some point. And so we're really sort of like the idea of thinking about everything else we do in life and not just the one sort of day.
Absolutely, it is. I'm showing here Abeer Bader, who is about to join us, is going to ask questions. So, folks, get your questions ready as I introduce her to some and present to others. Abeer Bader, who is a registered dietitian. I was looking at her email. She has a few credentials behind her name as well. And so, welcome to the Java Cafe. This is your first time here. And so, first, please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your what is your favorite sort of unhealthy dish for the holidays? But welcome.
Thanks so much for having me. It's nice to be here. So as you guys know, my name is Abeer. I am a dietitian. I'm currently working at the Mass General Weight Center as the lead dietitian. And prior to that, I was actually working in Canada. So I made the move from there, working as a diabetes dietitian and with individuals that have excess weight. My favorite unhealthy food, I think I love all foods, and I try to include all in moderation, but I'd have to agree with Dr. Alabre, pecan pie is on my list. Yes.
We're talking like Southerners, pecan versus pecan. And so we're getting ready to take questions in just a few moments, but Abeer, working in that space as far as the clinic with those that, you know, are classified or whatever, with you know, being obese, Dr. Stanford really gave a comprehensive presentation around and we're, you know, talking to a lot of Black and brown individuals that it's not the typical sort of BMI and sort of approach to being healthy. And I'll ask you, like I did Dr. Alabre, what were your thoughts in reference to her talk? And we're going to go beyond just the food in a few minutes as well, because diet, and as Dr. Alabre says, stresses and things definitely have a influence on our overall health. And so first, what was your reaction to her talk?
I mean, I think her talk was, of course, excellent. Dr. Stanford is an excellent speaker as well as clinician. I think, you know, we need to make sure everyone's aware that the contributing factors to excess weight and obesity are so complex, as she highlighted. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. And we need to really think about, you know, does this person have a genetic contributing factor to their excess weight? What kind of environment are they living within? Because we know that the environment also that we're living within is contributing to that excess weight. What are some factors that we have control over to some degree? You know, food, physical activity, stress, sleep. Are these people on maybe some medications that's contributing to the weight or difficulty in losing weight, right? When did they start gaining their weight? So we really like to take a deep dive into an individual to get to know them and then tackle the factors that we have control over to some degree.
Thank you for that. And Dr. Alabre, to your point earlier, you talked about, I mean, this is focusing healthy living during the holidays because this is, I think, the time of year outside of the summer where you're permitted to kind of be a little unhealthy. And so can we just talk for a couple of seconds? And we actually have one question we're going to get to in a second. But the correlation, Abeer, that Dr. Alabre talked about, not just this time of year, but in our overall routine and preventative healthcare, how important is diet?
I think diet is extremely important, right? And so what you have to think about what influences diet. There's multiple factors: culture, cost, likes, dislikes, healthy, not healthy. So we have to think about all these things. And, you know, I want to take a step back and say the holiday is a holiday, right? So enjoy that day. But the concern is it becomes a season, as we highlighted, right? So I think we don't want to really overthink or over restrict our intake during the day to save up for the evening. Eat as you would eat. Try to think of well-balanced meals at breakfast and lunch. Take an additional walk possibly, and then enjoy the foods that are part of your culture and part of Thanksgiving, right? And so I think that's really important to note. And when it comes to diet, you really want to plan ahead. I think one thing that we really want to highlight today is planning is key. Okay. We're not just going to eat healthy and wing it. Really, a lot of time you have to think about time, planning ahead. What are the foods that I like to have? Which foods are going to provide me with the nutrition I need for me to function appropriately, for me to feel satisfied and energized and living life to the fullest. So I think planning is really key. And that looks different for each person.
Planning and like food prep. And thank you for naming some barriers like cost. And, you know, I notice often when I want to go toward the organic section, it's a little more expensive, and eating healthy for a lot of individuals in general is interesting. And then COVID, and now what's going on with the food supply. And so we just want to name that as well. I want to ask one question on behalf of a viewer, and this is Pastor Marion listening from Boston. Beer, what is your favorite and what do you recommend in the whole wheat fruit and bread category?
That's a great question with multiple questions in it. I would say, when it comes to fruit, really all fruits are of good nutritional value. So I personally love the strawberries and the berries. Those are excellent volume-rich foods. You can eat a lot of it without really impacting your weight and your glucose. And they have quite a bit of fiber. So the berries category are great, as well as other fruits that you might enjoy, including, apples and pears and bananas and mangoes. I know bananas get quite a bit of bad rap, but they're excellent choices. And then when it comes to bread, the key word is whole wheat or whole grain. And you really want to look for that 100% sign. Because if it's not 100% whole grain or whole wheat, you might not necessarily get adequate fiber or adequate nutrients. So that key is 100% whole grain or whole wheat.
Okay, thank you. And Dr. Alabre, I wanted to ask you kind of not a funny question, but within the ER or routine and preventative health care, do you see people come in because they overate the day of? I mean, it would really be possible. Sometimes I ate and I'm hurting for like a half an hour. And so to Abeer's point that, plan ahead. I'm one that will not eat all day. And then when I sit down with the plate, it's like, so
Right.
Dr. Alabre, do you see people coming
So
in?
I have not been in the ER for a while, so I can't say I see that. And luckily, I've had the opportunity to be off on that day for a few years now. But I'm sure it happens. And actually, that's a good question. I wanted to mention this as well. We do have a study from 2019 that was done from the University of California, San Diego, and Tufts University just around the corner that actually showed a 5% increase in heart attacks during the holidays from standard time, and that is from December 26th to January the 2nd. And obviously I'm not assigning that to just one factor. We do know it's multiple, but bad habits, bad eating, bad healthy lifestyle are all contributors. We know stress is one, and this kind of ties in well with also the previous segment we had and what we have coming up, because we do know that a lot of people also delay care during the holidays. Either because they're traveling, they're busy, or they may ignore certain signs. So like, oh, this can wait, or whatever it is, obviously. And then also the mental health aspect, which we're gonna be talking about in a couple of weeks, the stress that the holidays can bring on. And we've really stressed a lot about how stress is important for life with everything else. It does include not sleeping, increasing your cortisol level, your insulin, weight, and lots of different factors. So stress is a big factor. So I really want to stress that taking care of yourself during the holidays is just as important as it is during the whole year.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Dr. Alabre. Abeer, what is and it's funny because I said Abeer, but my next question, what is the correlation between healthier alcohol consumption and how does that contribute to either high sugar levels? I know alcohol turns to sugar in the blood, if I'm correct. What do we need to consider when it comes to alcohol consumption over the holidays?
That's a great question as well. I think it ultimately depends on one's medical conditions and their goals. But in the end of the day, in moderation is key. If possible, 1 to 2 drinks is appropriate enough, possibly adding a bit of a protein and a carb with it. For some people, alcohol can actually decrease their blood glucose in the case of people who are possibly taking insulin or oral hypoglycemic agents. So it really depends on the person, I'd say. But in the end, moderation is key, trying to avoid the sugar sweetened alcohol beverages as well.
Thank you so much for that. We have another question.
And just one quick thing
ahead,
too. I want to piggyback on what Abeer mentioned earlier. A caution, I guess, for people is that the food industry has a loophole when it comes to whole grains, that they can actually get away with putting that label on by just saying contains whole grain. It could be 1%. 0.5%, but it's true what they're saying. But the key thing is that you're missing, it's not 100% whole grains or whole wheat. It's really just some fraction of it that we don't actually know. So be careful.
Well, to Abeer's point, she said that a few minutes ago when she was answering Pastor Marion's question around, being 100%. So thank you for that, Dr. Alabre. Thaddeus Miles is asking, I'm hearing different recommendations about salt intake if you drink a lot of water, 100 ounces plus per day. Should we shift if we have high water intake? And what's your daily milligrams of salt recommendations if you have high blood pressure? I usually say this in the beginning of our Your Healthy Java, and Thaddeus knows this as well. Both of these clinicians have not had the opportunity to examine you. And so what they're giving is general information. And so as you've heard Abeer refer to a couple of times, that, it depends on your medical condition, even things like age, gender. And so we just want to reiterate that these are sort of general answers to general medical questions. And so to Thaddeus's question, Abeer, what is your response regarding water intake and salt?
That's a great question. Also very individual, as you mentioned. When it comes to salt intake, believe it or not, I think the last statistic I read is the average American consumes about 3.4 grams of salt or sodium a day. And we really want to try our best to be at around 2.3 grams or 2,300 milligrams. For an individual that has hypertension or high blood pressure, or we're trying to really maintain slightly lower sodium intake, it might be closer to the 1.5 grams or 1,500 milligrams. And so, with that said, there's a lot of sodium hidden in so much food, in so many packaged things, obviously in salt. 1 teaspoon of salt is 2.3 grams. That's the total intake for the day. So you want to really think about reading the label, trying your best to choose something that's slightly lower in sodium, would be my recommendation.
Thank you so much for that. And we have one question again from Pastor Marion. Is sparkling cider healthy?
Sparkling cider healthy? I think it really depends. If you're trying to enjoy it on the Thanksgiving day, enjoy it, go for it. Maybe aim to have 4 ounces or 8 ounces. But if it's something that we're including every day or as part of our lifestyle, it might not necessarily be the best because there's quite a bit of sugar in that. So I think, if it's a matter of a holiday, enjoy it in moderation. Otherwise, I would recommend getting your sugar from the actual fruit and reaping a lot of that nutrients from the fruit as well as the fiber.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to shift around a little bit in the questions. And so I will also say that we, aren't going to make any recommendations, particularly to brands. One, because we just went with MGH, and 2, they haven't sent us a check to support them. No, I'm just messing. But what are some examples, looking for the 100%? What are some other general things, Abeer, that Pastor Marion can do to ensure that she's eating the healthiest type of bread?
I think other things that you can take a look at is where's sugar in the ingredient list. So sometimes sugar is quite high in the ingredient list, and typically if it's in the top 3, it might not necessarily be the best bread option. So you want to also take a look at serving size. Sometimes we take 2 various brands of bread and we're like, okay, I'm going to go with this one because it has lower calories and higher fiber, but it's reflective of 1 slice or 30 grams versus another one that might be reflective of 2 slices and slightly larger in weight. So I think don't forget about taking a look at that serving size, which is key and critical in determining the rest of the nutrients on there. So I would take a look at serving size. And for a healthier bread, it really depends on your goals. But ultimately, I like to take a look at fiber. Trying to make sure you have a bread that has more than 3 grams of fiber in a serving is key. And those would be my first 2 go-tos with regards to the nutritional facts table, and then really be mindful of that sugar. Try to make sure it's not in the top 3 of the ingredient list.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Alabre, anything to contribute there before we go? We're going to kind of merge a little back into the water as well. Someone is asking about, can the bubbly water replace water? Dr. Alabre, anything that you would like to add on top of Abeer's?
Not particularly. Are you talking about the sparkling cider or the bubbly water?
Sparkling cider, bubbly water.
So, I mean, bubbly water, there are definitely different types out there. And as Abeer mentioned, look at the label and make sure there is nothing added to it. So the typical bubbly water is just water with carbonation. And so there shouldn't be anything else added. There are some flavored ones that are just fruit extract that are typically the good ones. So they're just natural fruit extract. So there isn't really anything added there. So there's no concerns. There are some concerns from dental care standpoint, there's been some reports that it is high acidity because of the CO2 that's been added there, and that can potentially contribute to erosion of the teeth. And one of the sort of recommendations is to have something else to sort of wash it down. It's not 100% consensus that it's bad for you. I think most people agree that it's actually okay to consume, and just be mindful that it's not the only thing you should have. Or if you have other conditions, obviously, like we mentioned, if you talk to your dentist and say this may not be the best thing for you for whatever reasons, maybe not the best thing for you. But in general, it is a no calorie added, no sugar added drink that is basically healthy.
Thank you. Abeer, we're going to sort of stay in this same vein as well. Sports beverages like pre-workouts that have caffeine have been a staple for athletes who exercise. It's also a huge antidepressant for students and others. How much caffeine is too much, and how can one balance bring down the amount of caffeine one consumes? Now, you're healthy Java. Damien, thank you so much for this question, sir.
That's a great question. And also going to go back to, it really depends on whether you need to reduce your caffeine intake or not. I'm a bit biased because I love coffee. I'm a caffeine drinker, and we know that caffeine is actually an antioxidant. There's a lot of heart protective properties as a result of actual caffeine, but that's not necessarily linked with sugar. So a lot of these sports beverages have quite a bit of added sugar in them. And so, I think practicing moderation is key and is important. Why are you drinking these? Are you drinking them to stay up all night? Are you doing this constantly? Is this contributing to the stress and the lack of hygiene? So I think these are really important things to think about before consuming these in excess. But I think moderation is key, and it really depends on whether you need to reduce these significantly.
Thank you for that.
I do have to add that as the name says, sports drinks, it really is designed to be consumed while you're exercising for sports. The idea behind those drinks is that they've added salt and sugar to allow you to retain water so you don't get dehydrated, and give you some sugar for fuel, for calories. So if you are not doing that, there's probably not a reason to be consuming it. If you are doing the sports that is requiring those types of drinks, then I think it's okay because you need it. But I do see a lot of patients, unfortunately, with high blood pressure, with obesity, who have gotten the habit of consuming those drinks, and it's really just not the right thing for you at that point.
Thank you, Dr. Alabre. I want to move us a little bit into sort of the sleep hygiene component that Dr. Stanford talked about, and we'll end out sort of with some ways that maybe we can use a diet to maybe avoid stress. And so this is a very, this is my question. What is the correlation of eating right before going to bed? There is a sort of each culture names it differently, but there's a word that we use in Black and brown culture called the itis. And so you eat to the point so much that you get real sleepy. What's the correlation, Abeer, between eating before you go to bed? Is it healthy to eat and then lay down? Can we talk just a little bit about how diet and our consumption hygiene contributes to our sleep hygiene?
I mean, I'm going to defer that to Dr. Alabre. He might know how to answer the biology behind that. But, we know that it typically is ideal to avoid any discomfort when you're sleeping, especially in those individuals that might have GERD or heartburn, to try your best to avoid eating for about 3 hours before going to bed. We also know that people who tend to stay up later tend to crave higher sugar, higher fat options, and tend to nibble more in the evening. And so that's why it's really important to practice sleep hygiene. But when it comes to that correlation piece, I'm going to defer it to Dr. Alabre.
Thank you. Dr.
Yes. So, I mean, you pretty much touch on that, Abeer. The correlation is really mostly about the discomfort, and the body needs time to process food that you ingest. After you eat, obviously, your stomach is going to produce all kinds of chemicals and sort of substances to help you break down those foods, and the stomach has to churn and turn and actually mix it. So the body is working, and it's just not the ideal time for you to go to rest while the body needs to actually work. So there's definitely a conflict there. And we do also know that a lot of people have acid reflux to some degree, and it's basically you are fighting against gravity at that point. If you go lay down after your stomach is full, it wants to come back up, and you don't have the assistance that you would get from being upright and standing to allow that to not regurgitate up, reflux back up. So that can be issues there. And we also know that acid can also, again, lead to bad dental health, if your acid from the stomach, which is supposed to be there, is coming back to your mouth. So that's going to delay your sleep onset. We also know now with lots of studies that eating really close to bedtime and not having a period during that day where you're not eating can contribute to weight gain. This is why the intermittent fasting theory is gaining a lot of steam, and there's starting to be good evidence to back it up that you can actually lose weight by allowing your body a 10, 12, or 14, depending on the situation, time of not having food.
So wait, hold on. Word 10, 12, 14 hours?
Well, there are different theories there, but that includes hopefully your 8 hours of healthy sleep time. So it's not as hard as it sounds. But basically, what's been found is that people who allow their body that 10 plus hours of no food time are more likely to lose weight or maintain their weight than people who are eating late into the night and waking up and eating again breakfast right after. So you have barely a 5 hour of no food time. Abeer, I don't know if you're seeing that much in your work, because obviously you work with people with obesity a lot, but the studies are starting to be quite telling on that.
Yeah, and I think the contributing factors are various. Some people in the evening, it's their time to sort of open up the cupboards or the kitchen, the fridge, and say, it's my time to eat now. The kids have gone to bed. It's sort of my time. So it eliminates that. When it comes to intermittent fasting, it's really helpful for some people, not all. Really, it's very much an individualized approach. But for some people, it's really helpful to have sort of a cutoff window as to when to stop eating. And depending on their medical conditions, we've seen, improvements in their sugar levels, among others. So there is no one size fits all is really key. And we just work with the client to see what is the best regimen out there that's going to keep you feeling energized and living life to the fullest. And balance is key, right?
Thank you so much. And as Dr. Alabre mentioned, we're going to go more into sort of a behavioral health perspective, because from COVID to anniversaries, that, not having loved ones here from the holidays and the impact of that in COVID and pre-COVID. But I wanted to sort of end this segment and talk a little bit about, and Dr. Alabre, you can do this, and Abeer, please jump in at any time, the correlation between stress. I'm sure, Abeer, you've heard of the term stress eating as a comfort. And so let's sort of close out with that. Before I also ask you to be I'm giving you a warning now, be intentional about some intentional gratitude. It's Thanksgiving week. And so you two do so much in the area of medicine and have been there through this pandemic. And so we want to also allow both of you an opportunity to just express some gratitude. And we're going to do that with you as well. But what's the correlation between stress eating and the impact of that? I guess, Abeer, if you could start, and then Dr. Alabre, if you could end with how it impacts our body. Abeer?
So as Dr. Alabre mentioned, sometimes what we're really concerned about is that persistent ongoing stress. We're not really concerned as much with that one stress. I have a deadline tomorrow, I'm going to stay up late. Okay. But what we're concerned about is that persistent ongoing stress. And that could be due to financial stress, emotional stress, work-related stress, whatever it might be. And so that persistent stress does increase cortisol levels. And with that said, with that stress, what we tend to see is people tend to gravitate towards higher fat, higher sugar, rich options. And so it results in overeating these foods. It could also result sometimes in abandoning your goals. I'm super stressed out. I was planning on going to the gym, or I was planning on going my walk. I'm going to disregard that and abandon my goals, right? That persistent stress could also affect your sleep. And so this is where it correlates with weight gain possibly.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Alabre?
Yeah, sure. This is also basically what I was gonna say, and there is a hormonal sort of correlation with eating, stress in weight and other health outcomes. So we do know as you are stressed, as Abeer mentioned, there can be an increase in cortisol level, which then leads to an increase in insulin level. And insulin is a growth factor that actually makes your body put on fat, put on weight, which can then have downstream effects on your bone health, your joint health, your blood pressure levels, your diabetes, obviously, level. We also don't understand everything about stress yet. There's a lot we don't know. We are appreciating stress more and more, which is great because it impacts almost every aspect of our lives, from concentration, your productivity, your ability to sleep. Again, if you stress, you're less likely to get good sleep. And if you don't sleep, you're likely to get more stress. So it gets in that cycle. And you don't do the normal repairs and you can't concentrate, your memory is affected. And your blood pressure can go up from that because of adrenaline. So there's a lot of different interplay between stress and your physiologic functioning, and then what we actually see, and unfortunately the outcomes, because having your heart rate be so high can lead to problems. Having your blood pressure be super high can lead to other things, including heart attacks and strokes, which are obviously significant and consequential.
Thank you, Dr. Alabre. And we just wanted to reiterate that stat that you gave us, that between December 26th and January 2nd or January 2nd, that there is a higher rate of heart attacks. And did you say among men?
All comers.
Among all.
Yeah, so 5% is the number.
We definitely need to do that. And so, Abeer, I'm going to ask you sort of on the spot, but I do this purposely with some of my guests just so the audience can, just kind of get to know them a little bit, or just a soft moment, because you all work so hard. Can you name one thing for which you are grateful and thankful for this year, today, whatever your thankfulness is, however you want to frame it and say it?
That's great. Thank you so much. And thanks for having me. I think I'm most thankful for good health. I have to always thank, God for good health, and for family. I think family has helped us tremendously in the last 2 years, especially with everything that's going on. Even though most of my family is halfway across the world, but I'm thankful for my little family here and good health. So those are my top two. And for the positive people that surround me.
Thank you. And Abeer, thank you so much. I presume this won't be your last time. We're talking about the holidays, but as Dr. Alabre started, this is a year round, 365, 24/7. And so thank you so much, Abeer. And Dr. Alabre, if you could also share any thankfulness or gratitude you have as well.
It has to be health as well. It has to be. It is really great to be able to, obviously, through this pandemic, be able to come to work, be with family, and take care of patients, help, hopefully, the people who may not be so fortunate to have the good health get through this and get to healthy living being sometime soon. And I hope everyone's able to enjoy the holiday to some degree, despite this horrible year and a half we've had.
Dr. Alabre and Abeer, I want to thank both of you so much for coming in this week, as we're, it's a busy week. And thank you, Abeer, for putting in this gap while you're seeing patients. Thank both of you. And I am thankful for both of you and the sacrifice that you made to be here today. And please give our regards to the teams there from the Office of Equity and also Community Health, Dr. Betancourt, Natalie, and everyone. Just on behalf of Java with Jimmy, we want to thank the Massachusetts General Hospital Office of Equity and Community Health for sponsoring this conversation. We will be back, as you see on the bottom of the screen. We have some guests coming in the room to talk about the mental health impact of the holidays. We talked a little bit today today about stress. We talked about sleep hygiene. And so in 2 weeks, we're going to come back with some great experts. That's one of the benefits of this partnership. Dr. Alabre and others are working to create a team and a pool of experts to whom we can speak about a lot of topics. And so I believe we answered all the questions before I let you go. Folks are saying thank you for the wise counsel. And one last question. We got a couple of seconds. Have either of you heard of Organo Gold Coffee with herb Ganoderma in it? Oh, you're laughing. You're laughing. So have you? I haven't.
I actually, I have a confession to make. I don't drink coffee at all.
Alabre, you don't Java? Oh my, I am shocked and appalled.
This is my big secret. I just don't know anything about coffee. I've never done it.
Abeer, oh my god, Abeer, do you consume? You partake?
I told you I'm a cafe.
Oh, yeah,
I love my black coffee. I love it. No sugar, no cream,
You
no milk.
saved me,
That's the way to
Abeer.
go.
Are you serious? Wow, I have to have some sugar and cream. And so, listen, I really appreciate that down moment from both of you. And it's a good thing for you all to see that our clinicians, our doctors, our nurses, radiology techs, housekeeping, all of them in the medical industry are human and not robots. And as Abeer and Dr. Alabre referred, that the past 19 months, 2 years have been very interesting. And so thank both of you for that joy moment that we had right there. And we'll be back in 2 weeks for your Healthy Java here on Java with Jimmy in the Java Cafe. Thank you all for tuning in today, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Happy holidays. Thank you.